Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our special board meeting. We will call the board meeting to order, and I will ask tonight if Dr. Volkemer, if you can lead us in the pledge.
It would be my honor. Please stand and join me in the pledge to our country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dr. Volkemer.
My pleasure.
Or shall I say the NAV? But you know what that means. Okay, we are now at 1.3, approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Flores. And is there a
Second.
All right, it's been moved and properly second. If there is no other discussion, I will go ahead and take the vote, and I'll call names because I think a couple of board members are not here, but Dr. Flores,
Aye.
Ms. Ceballos. I know I saw her on. Ms. Ceballos? Dr. Okay, thank you. Dr. Hill?
Aye.
Dr. Wyatt?
Aye.
Ms. Rosales Medina?
Aye.
Mr. Tillman? Let's see here.
Aye.
Right, and Dr. Dowdy Rogers, aye, motion carried. Thank you. All right, we are now moving to public comments. And Ms. Cunningham, are there any public comments?
We received one, but I don't believe she's here. I will call her name. Give me 1 second.
Right.
Forgot it. Okay. Jasmine Macias, if you're there. She's not here.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll keep an eye out. All right, thank you so much. We will now move to 3.0 presentations. 3.1 budget update.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Doctor, and thank you. It's finally I'm here, and so I just wanted to give a high-level overview. I had a chance to, even though this is my first board meeting, and first of all, I want to say that I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to work with the board. And so behind the scenes, I've had an opportunity to work with the team on their budget. And so tonight I wanted to let you know that you're going to hear an update on the additional state and federal funds that's going to be received. And many of these dollars are really one-time dollars that we have or will receive to support students, obviously on the other side of this pandemic. And then keep in mind that these changes to the state budget will continue to evolve, right? It's not set in stone as of yet. So as you know, the governor recently rolled out his May revision, and in the beginning of this, at the beginning of this budget adoption process for the 21-22 school year, and the state and the Senate recently submitted their budget proposals, but they're different than what the governor had submitted. So budget negotiations are going to continue to play out over the next couple of weeks. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about the final budget in terms of the district's concern. Now, prior to my arrival as superintendent, the district had already been gathering input from our community and our stakeholders through the LCAP process, the input meetings, and also during the development of the return to school roadmap. So they've been getting a lot of feedback and input. So moving forward, you will see, and I'll share this at a later date, my superintendent entry plan that will include which includes a robust listening and learning campaign. It's going to help us provide those themes and those ideas and areas of strength for the district, and then also opportunity for improvement. So just keep that in mind as well. So it's going to take me about 6 months, but what they're going to share tonight, these current budget allocations, they allow time for us to allocate funds. So I want to be very clear. It allows time for us to allocate funds based on the district needs right now. And then also those identified needs will be really finalized once I finish this listening and learning campaign. And we complete a lot of student pre-assessments and so on. So I want to be clear here that we have to be cautious because we have to ensure that the one-time funding is obviously allocated to one-time expenditures, but at the same time, we have to provide a robust support program to students. So, but keep in mind, most importantly, as I turn it over to Janie, that our students will be assessed when they return to school, and we'll be able to determine their immediate, their needs around academic, social, emotional wellness, and health needs. But again, just keep in mind that we don't have to spend all the dollars right away. We have to have a plan. We got to be patient on this plan. And so we'll engage, we'll jump right in, but I'll turn it over to Janie at that point in time. Or actually, I think is Rachel jumping in first.
Yes.
And as you're moving forward, maybe perhaps Ms. Christakis is going to do this, but we would like to do a formal introduction of Mr. Sullins is on the line.
Oh, yeah. Is Mr. Sullins on the line?
Yes, he is.
I am here, yes.
He's in box number 4 in my screen.
Yeah, before we get started, Janie, would you like to introduce our newest member of cabinet who will officially start in July, but he's here with us now?
Yes, board and community, let's give a warm welcome to Mr. Harold Sullins. He will be the new Associate Superintendent of Business Service starting July 1, and we're so thankful that he could attend this budget workshop. Welcome, Harold.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you all.
Thank you, Harold. All right, well, I will get us started. So thank you, Mr. Irvin, for the introduction. And again, welcome to San Bernardino City Unified. You will just love the community, love the staff, and most importantly, you will fall in love with our children. Good evening, Dr. Rogers, Dr. Wyatt, board members, community cabinet. We are going to do a high-level overview of the budget. And so my part of it, of course, Ms. Christakis will go into the detail of the budget numbers, but I will and then I will link it to some of the actual program work that we're doing as a district. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll give the objectives. So tonight, we want to make sure that we outline for the board how and by when funds may be invested to accelerate services and supports for students, provide an overview of how SBCUSD will use the funds to accelerate these supports for students, while also working on laying a groundwork for long-term transformation. Because as Mr. Irvin shared, some of the funds are, many of the funds actually are one-time expenditures. So we want to use them to build infrastructure and again, groundwork so we can transform the district into what we know it can and should be for our scholars. And then finally this evening, to utilize input already gathered through the LCAP process to expand access to high quality education and support services. So we want to make sure the board knows that the various LCAP input meetings that we have had throughout this school year have informed how the funds that we have received from the federal government are being expended or have been expended. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Christakis, and she'll start with some driver slides on resource allocation.
Thank you, Dr. Menares. Next slide, please. So board, over the last year, we've received a variety of funds, which, as you know, we've given updates all year long around how those funds were spent to ensure that our students and staff were returning to school and work in a safe environment. A lot of funding was used for technology and learning support, as well as PPE and sanitizing supplies and equipment. And these are the various sources that we've had over the past year. They were all one time and they are all expended. So we just wanted to give you that overview. Next slide, please. So as we look at this slide, I think it was board member Ceballos that asked, what's one time and what's ongoing? So I wanted to provide this to you as well. We expect to receive ESSER 2 funding of $102.4 million. It is one time and we have till September of 23 to spend it. We have ESSER 3 funding coming and it's $227.9 million. Have till September of 24 to spend it. Again, it's one time. And then the AB 86 expanded learning grant, That came to board at the last meeting and you approved the spending plan. Ms. Applegate presented that to you and it's $42 million, $0.1 million. Now we'll talk about it today because we're leveraging those state dollars with the ESSER 2 and 3 funds to ensure the most robust support for our students. As of now, the May revise has an LCFF COLA of 5.07%. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later. We didn't receive a COLA this year. It's about $24 million, and we'll show how that's used to pay for expenses related to the salary schedule. Now in the governor's proposal, he recommended moving the concentration grant to 65% of our base grant, up from 50%. The legislature is not, we're hearing, they haven't been specific that they want it much lower so more districts can receive funding. So we're going to have to wait for that state adoption to find out exactly what additional funds we'll have for our supplemental concentration, which will be incorporated into the LCAP. And so that total funding, almost 397,000, most of it one time. And then I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Menarez.
All right, and before you begin, Dr. Menarez, Mr. Tillman?
Yes, thank you. First, I want to start by welcoming Mr. Irvin and Mr. Sullins. Welcome aboard. Look forward to working with you all. Can we go back to the slide, the one that showed the $92 million that we spent already?
Yes, it's right here.
And can I get an idea, just in like, some of these are big numbers. So does anyone know just in a high level, for instance, on the CARES Act, ESSER, what that $25 million was spent on?
So Mr. Tillman, I have a broad over the whole 91 million. We could get you the breakdown, but technology was approximately 31 million. So that's Chromebooks and hotspots or Kajits. The learning supports were 12 million. PPE and sanitizing supplies and equipment was.
Ms. Christoff, when you say learning support, what's an example of a learning support?
So, you know, there were packets, there were other instructional supports that the teachers needed to adjust to distance learning. Ms. Applegate could probably give you some more examples than that.
Yes.
And so go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Christakis. Yes, we did have learning bundles for TK through 3rd grade that were purchased for all grade levels, sent out to all students. We also had incurred quite large printing costs for all the other materials that teachers wanted. There were extra duty hours as well for all the planning of the curriculum guides and all the resources. We also did purchase Imagine Learning and some of the other digital platforms to support distance learning. So most of that was everything that we needed for distance learning.
And that was out of the line 3?
You know, Mr. Tillman, I just put together, we just took all of the funding and then just what was everything spent on. I didn't have it broken out by each line, but we could get that.
And I just want to do it from a positive perspective. I think it's important that the public understands what we spent this money on. It was one-time money. It was to address the immediate need. So I think it's good just to be clear. You could use the same numbering system. It'd just be good to have a breakout of what it was. I mean, even to the extent where we say technology, if we bought, 30,000 Chromebooks and 2,000 iPads, whatever it was, I think it's important to make sure that the public knows what we spent their dollars on.
Thank you, Mr. Tillman. We can incorporate that in our presentation, budget presentation next week.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Dr. Flores?
I also wanted line item analysis of our expenditures of the 92 million, and just to be transparent with the public so that everyone knows exactly where it was spent. So I agree with Mr. Tillman.
And I think that is Ms. Rosales Medina's comment. The same thing. So again, back to what we had talked about in the previous LCAP, it just makes it more transparent and helpful for us as we speak with the community.
Hey, Dr. Rogers?
Yes.
Dr. Rogers?
Yes.
So I would say that, yeah, on the itemized breakdown, what I'll do is I'll work offline with the team, and we may be able to get that to the board in a Friday update, but also we'll be able to find a way to attach it for the next board meeting. So this way we don't have to go through the whole thing, but we'll attach it as part of the presentation as well. So we'll get it to the board and itemize, and then we'll also make sure we try to attach it at the next agenda. Even though we've reviewed the agenda, let me see if there's a way that we can attach that so it's there. Janie, I think we should be able to do that, but we'll touch base offline.
Sure,
so this way
sure.
that will help speed things along in the future. Okay.
Great.
Madam President, I forgot I had another question. I'm sorry.
Okay. Go ahead.
Can you forward it to the last slide that we had? That one, yeah. So just for clarification, we have not itemized the expenditures of any of these budget items, correct?
So Dr. Flores, a little bit later in the presentation, will show you the broad categories. And again, there's 3 years to spend most of the money. So we'll show you those categories. And then as Superintendent Irvin had talked about, as kids return and we need to adjust to additional or different needs, we'll be making amendments to the budget. And we're going to show the timeline where that will be coming to the board in July.
So
some of it.
CARES Act is that 2 and 3?
Yes.
Does that money provide for COVID testing of our kids?
I don't know if that's in the plan. I'd have to look, Dr. Flores, but we do have, I'll find out for you.
Okay, because, you know, I've been listening a lot to, CDC and also Fauci and the team and also scientists. And they are saying that we may get variants of COVID, and we should be having a robust also testing of our children before we get the vaccinations for the kids. So I just want to, Mr. Irvin, welcome. And I just wanted to just put that, red flag in our hats. So
yeah. As we get more information on that, Dr. Flores, on what the guidelines are in regards to testing students and so on, I think we'll come back to the board at a later date with that. But right now, I don't know if there's really clear guidance on that. So yeah, definitely that's something we'll take under consideration. But I would ask that we be patient until we get more guidance and more information regarding whether that's going to be a requirement or not. And if it is, and obviously we'll deal with it. But yeah, we'll definitely look into where they are with that in terms of requiring students to be tested and so on. So, okay.
Thank you.
And then whether or not those monies can be used for that or not, I'm not sure. I haven't heard that or seen that. But Janie, I think we can get you that information, and then we'll loop back with the entire board.
Yeah,
okay,
and
thank you.
If I could add to that, Mr. Irvin, what we are doing in terms of testing is we are in the process of reviewing, we put out a request for proposal, yes, I think that's what it's called, to find an agency or a group that can provide what we're calling COVID liaisons at each one of our schools. And those liaisons will be health professionals, and they will be able to do the screening of our students and the testing as necessary. And that's part of the requirement that we have asked of them in order to qualify for this contract with us. So we do have some of that in place or we're getting it in place for the school year. It won't be ready for our summer program, but it will be ready for next school year.
Thank you,
Dr. Flores and Rachel, clarity. I believe I believe some of that may be in the plan as well, Rachel, but we'll confirm offline. But I believe it is in the plan going forward.
It is. It's planned for. So it's probably it's budgeted, I believe, in the previous slide.
Okay, great. And we'll get back with the board on that, and even as part of a Friday update, Rachel and team, Dr. Dottie Roger will include that in a Friday update as well, that information.
Thank you. Dr. Menards, no other questions?
Okay, great.
I have a question. I'm sorry.
Okay. Oh,
Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I just wanted to remind, so for transparency purposes, I do agree with Mr. Tillman, what he mentioned, to have it shown by line item, or at least the top several points of what we spent on. We've done this as a great example for Mr. Irwin to know that we have, for LCAP purposes, we've shared long lists at the board meeting. So we have done that before. For transparency purposes, I think we should be sharing that publicly as well, maybe create a format where we can do that. But I wouldn't want just us board to receive that. If the public have questions on what the monies are being spent, or at least for them to view it, I think that would be a great way to do it as well.
Okay, we'll go back with the team and talk that through.
All right, thank you. I expect that. Thank you.
All right. Okay, Dr. Menares.
Okay. So with that, if we can go to the next slide. All right. So Mr. Irvin already spoke to this, but there is a timeline for planning and budgeting. And so we want to recognize that our new superintendent has just come on. It's day 2 for him. And so he will have a robust listening and learning tour where he will be meeting with various stakeholder groups, community members, and just getting a very large picture of what is happening in our district and where things should go. And so we want to give time to that. And thankfully, because of what Ms. Christakos just shared, we have that time. We don't have to budget everything that has come to us from the federal government right now. We can come back, and we will come back in July to share priorities and any new state dollars that are actually for sure to us from the state. Then we have an opportunity to do a 45-day budget revision in August. We will come back in October and let you know how things are going in terms of our academic achievement, expenditure, and what the data is looking like for our scholars. And then, of course, the December 1st interim. And while that's going on, Superintendent Irving will be out and about meeting with people and collecting data. So we want to be sure that we are thoughtful and intentional on how we use these funds to accelerate learning services and supports for our scholars. So keep that in mind as we go through this, that we don't have to allocate everything, and it's not intended to. It's intended to help support students and our staff and our families over a time period. The next slide then takes us to the conversation that's really happening both federally and at a local level. This is just one example of a research brief that comes from California, and there is a lot of conversation about reimagining and rebuilding our schools, and restarting them. This brief is about starting with equity at the center. And so we chose a quote that really just identifies that we want to build toward an education system that places equity at the center. We know that's been a long-standing priority for our board. And as we come out of this pandemic and we're on the other side, as Mr. Irvin likes to say, with these new funds, how do we leverage that and prepare our system so that we are that leader in equity in for our students? So we have to be thoughtful of that. And this brief is one example of what we're looking at as we're planning and allocating for our school year moving forward. This information will be coupled with and matched up and themed with what Mr. Irvin gathers. That brief really talks about 5 areas of what a school district can do to put equity at the center. And so I just want to highlight a couple of key phrases here. So it talks about making relationships the center of the work and prioritizing that. So a lot of work around social emotional learning, of course, for our scholars, but also our staff and our families. And so our work is intentional around that, and we've budgeted money there. We also want to be sure that we are addressing whole child needs. And so identifying those needs, that goes to the need for assessing our scholars when they come on campus and having ways to assess them and do that early. So we don't want to move too fast before we know what children need, right? So making sure we've got strong systems around building relationships, assessing our students to make sure we meet all the various needs, strengthening the staff and partner relationships. So community engagement, family engagement, while we're making sure that teaching and learning is relevant and rigorous. You're going to see these themes run through some of the expenditures that we will speak to a little bit later in the presentation. And then the long-term, really systemic piece is around building our teams at our school sites and at our district level to be collaborative in nature. That's what will then long-term systemically transform our district. And so thinking about our schools in terms of clusters and how we build those and further develop the schools. That's the long-term goal. This comes again from the research brief that comes out of PACE, the Policy Analysis for California Education. California School Board Association has been a part of this work. The Association for Access, or Association for California Superintendents and Administrators, has been a part of that. And there's been multiple people just really talking about keeping equity at the center. So that's one piece of information that we're using to help shape where we're going for our school district. Next slide, please. In addition, we have, under the leadership of Ms. Applegate and Mr. Komnick, gathered tons of data from our families through the LCAP process. And so these are the themes that have that the community has teased out and our staff has teased out from our schools around what they want to see in our LCAP. This information will also inform our work around how we're going to expend and use the funds that have come from the federal government. So you see that there's an academic achievement piece, there's community involvement and support, and school climate. And I want to emphasize this is the data that and the themes that came from our community LCAP input process. This does not also include the district goals. So there's some additional district goals that we will be adding as we move forward, and again, as Mr. Irving gathers information through his Listen and Learn campaign. And so the next slide then shows how we're pulling this all together, and right now it will be in our roadmap to opening. So we are just getting ready to start our task force. We have these 4 guiding principles. I shared these briefly with you probably about a month ago. They've shifted slightly, some of which was based off of what I just shared in terms of what we're learning from the research base, what our community is saying, and just some wordsmithing of language. So we have 4 guiding principles. First one is social emotional learning, mental and physical wellness. And again, that's about everybody in the system. So our students, our families, and our staff. We want to make sure, and so in our roadmap, we will have equity, access, and inclusion, and you'll see that rolling through the roadmap. Again, you can hear how that connects back to the Keeping Equity at the Center brief that we received, or that I shared just a few slides before. High quality learning and academic achievement. So we heard that from that brief, but we also heard that from our families through the input gathered in LCAP. And then of course, we have to make sure that our schools remain safe. Both the facilities are safe and that we're operating under the appropriate guidance at the given time. So these guiding principles will be in our roadmap, and we have allocated the funds to further support the development of these and providing services for our students, our families, and our staff. So with that, I'll turn it over back to Ms. Christakos, and she'll talk a bit more about the funding.
Okay, Ms. Christakos, before you begin your one-time funding process, a couple of things. Mr. Tillman, was your question prior? You want to ask something about the prior, or you're still want to wait?
I'll wait to the end.
Okay, and then there was a question in reference to the LCAP conversation from Ms. Rosas Medina. How did the district collect the LCAP priorities from parents? So can someone share that out before we move to the next section?
I'll start, and then Ms. Applegate, you further augment, because you know it much more integral than I do. But we used Thought Exchange as the process to gather the information. It's a platform where families they kind of rate each other's responses. So if someone puts something in the system, we ask a question, they put it in the system, and then if someone else really likes that, it's kind of like a Facebook, you heart it or you like it, and then it starts to rise to the top. So that's one way where they gather the information. Ms. Applegate, go ahead and add more detail than what I just shared, because I know there's a lot more.
So Thought Exchange was one way, but Thought Exchange also has the capacity to send out surveys before the meeting. So parents have plenty of time to think about how they might want to contribute. As Dr. Menares mentioned, they have the ability to be able to look at other responses and rate them before the live meeting. And we also had, at the live meeting, we had breakout rooms where parents were allowed to be in breakout rooms and also give input. And we also had a link on our website where parents could go see the current LCAP, read it, give some ideas. And I know that our site leaders as well have had meetings around some of the LCAP ideas and thoughts and some of these services and programs that our parents might want. So there were different opportunities, as well as our governance councils. So we also had presentations from Mr. Comnick's office at the DLAC, at some of the other governance council meetings as well.
Thank you for sharing that. And so with that, I guess the follow-up question would be, how were you able to get them all together? Where I know it was mentioned that they were looking at common topic points and so forth. Is there a way where we can look at that as well? Because I know in our first time doing LCAP within the district, we received data at least showing us. I know that through the presentation you're telling us, but if there's a way you can share with us the documentation just to give us an overview, this is what how it was voted and so forth. That way we can see, at least for me personally, I would like to see that as well. But thank you for sharing that.
Yes, of course. And we can provide surveys and we can provide the thought exchange data as well. Thank you.
Dr. Flores, we will we will get that one. I think that'll be one on our parking lot at the end. So someone be prepared to answer that question from Dr. Flores. Unless they want to say yes or no now.
I would continue to move on with the presentation.
Okay.
Maybe we can answer that at the end, because I'd be honest with you, I don't have the answer to that.
I think someone may. Okay, so we will now going back to Ms. Christakis, I believe it is.
Thank you. So again, this is just reiterates that first slide. On the left, where you see the arrow pointed to the left, are the funds that are fully expended or board approved. So let me explain. The blue circles are federal funds. The kind of the rust color are state funds. So everything to the left has been spent or board approved. The Expanded Learning Opportunities Grant was board approved at the last board meeting. You'll see that under the August 31st circle. And in the next couple slides, we'll talk about that. Leveraged with the ESSER 2 funds and the ESSER 3 funds with the arrows pointed to the right. Does that make sense? Those are the funds that will be coming to the board and proposed budgets over the next couple of years. Now, again, I want to reiterate, these are one time and should not be spent on things that continue to cost money over time. It's really to provide an extraordinary support to the district over the next couple of years to help our students and staff following this pandemic, but it is not ongoing. So that's just really important to understand. And as you know, the state budget fluctuates greatly up and down. So we want to use these funds to really assist us over the next couple of years and be mindful that they're one time. Next slide, please. So these are the broad categories that we talked about where we have spent the funding for current year and then have proposed in the multi-year projection. That's all very broad. Superintendent Urban talked about this. We're going to make sure that we have things allocated where we need it, but we wanted to get some placeholders in the budget. So the team is going to go through each line and give you some examples of what these expenditures look like. I'll turn it over to Dr. Rodriguez for line number 1.
Great, thank you, Jeannie. So we know that social emotional learning is really the base and foundation to having classrooms where students can thrive. And so some of these funds will be used for training our teachers in social emotional learning. We are also purchasing a new curriculum because we do not have a curriculum for social emotional learning. And in addition, we will be looking at additional staff in the form of counselors and therapists in order to meet the needs of our students who are coming out of the pandemic. And so we're making a concerted effort to train our teachers over the summer and throughout the school year to make sure that all of our learning environments are conducive for learning in places where kids feel safe and will thrive. Thank you.
Line number 2.
And so right now we're looking at some expenditures in equity, access, and inclusion that include possibly some equity counselors or program specialists or some staff that can add additional support to our EDSA department. We're also looking at culturally relevant curriculum, professional development for teachers, and other opportunities. We also have teacher leaders and teacher groups who are helping to include culturally relevant curriculum and embedding that into our curriculum guides. And so we have extra duty pay for teachers doing that work as well. And so I know that Dr. Greer has also a couple of contracts that he's looking at with some outside vendors for that. But I know that we'll be revamping as we start looking at the way we deliver our service. We'll be looking at the allocation and how we can spend that as well. And as far as the high quality learning and academic achievement, we really are focusing on making sure that we have the assessment and curricular alignment, the system that we need to assess our students and make sure that we meet their needs. We also have curriculum that's specialized for tier 2 interventions that we're looking at for our students. We're also really going to concentrate on our service delivery model, making sure that as we improve systems in ed services, that we have a way to deliver those systems in an effective way, because we know post-pandemic, we want all of our students to be able to have equitable experiences, and very difficult to do from the central office to 72 schools. So we really are looking at the way that we do our service delivery within high quality learning and academic achievement. We are also looking at continuing on with our intern programs to help students. We are looking at additional teachers in the form of our guest teachers to help with reading and with math, TK6. So that's going to be an additional support to every school. They will have an additional teacher for reading and mathematics to help students who have struggled during the pandemic. And just continuing to look at high quality interventions and programs that can assist our students with the expanded learning opportunities as well. We want to continue to invest in those for our students.
And then I'll take line 4. I'm actually going to read something from the criteria on the spending. Is developing strategies and implementing public health protocols, including to the greatest extent practicable, policies in line with guidance from the CDC for the reopening and operation of school facilities to maintain the health and safety of students, educators, and staff. So some of the examples that we have are, we have some very, very antiquated old chiller systems that break down, and it's really difficult to ensure good air conditioning and good airflow. So we'll be replacing about 18 of those, purchasing some new lunch tables so that we have opportunities for kids to have, lunch outside, and just being able to distance some of the students. And then just other ways to improve indoor air quality are some examples of the safe facilities and operations. And I would move to the next slide. I think we have a question on this slide.
Madam President, may I go?
That like froze me for a second. And yes, go ahead, Mr. Tillman.
So this is, I want to stop on this because it's critical. I'm assuming that the titles on the top where it says projected 21, 22, 22, 23, and 23, 24 are when the monies have to be spent by?
These are, no, earlier we showed, and we can go back, Mr. Tillman, to show when they, maybe we just go back a couple slides. Let's see the slide. See right here, that's when they have to be spent, 23 and 24, and the AB 86 has to be spent in 22. So if we can advance forward again, this is what we've just placed as placeholders in the multi-year projection, but just because we know we're getting the money, and we want to ensure that we are spending the money on time. And that was one of your concerns at the last board meeting. But as Superintendent talked about, we can adjust these. We can move from one category to another without a problem.
No, you asked my question. My fear is this. I see this as money that's limited. and I heard Ms. Rodriguez say they're going to hire counselors. So how do you hire counselors if this is one-time money and it's ongoing? And how many counselors are we talking about?
So in regards to that, this is one area in which there's lots of pots of money. And so as we're looking at social emotional learning as a whole, we were looking at how do we respond to the needs of some of our schools at the elementary level, where some of our schools are running at 700 kids with one counselor. And so bringing in folks, whether it is just additional resources to provide that, that bridge for this pandemic, because we don't know what to expect during this time. And so not necessarily looking at ongoing costs with this support, but we do know that we need to respond to the needs of students as they arise.
So let me be clear. The reason why one of the reasons for the special board meeting is just for this clarity. These are one-time dollars. The last budget we had going into 2020, 2021, we deficit spent by, $50 million, and the ending balance was down to $50 million. And I guess normally in the past, it'd been like $100 million. So as everyone's projecting that you're going to have lower enrollment. I know there's some money if the governor and the legislature come to a medium, we'll get some extra money maybe in the local control funding formula. And I understand we get COLA. A lot of times that's taken up by just step and column. And if you're going to have any kind of raise in the near future, that costs. So my fear is, and I hope we all come to an agreement somewhere that there's very little money for additional staff. So whenever I hear we're going to hire additional counselors, now Ms. Applegate said we're going to hire guest teachers. That's fine, because guest teachers are full-time employees. They get on a list, we have work, and then they accept the work that we put out there. So it's very easy to manage that. But the worst case scenario is to hire another 20 or 30, 40, 50 counselors. And then in 3 years, the money's gone. And those are full-time employees. And then we have to somehow give notice that you can't work anymore because the money is not here. That never goes easy. So we shouldn't put ourselves in that predicament because we don't have the ongoing costs. I don't have a problem if we want to contract with companies to provide counseling services, but we can't hire full-time employees with this money unless I'm missing something. And you guys can make me aware of what I'm missing.
Well, Mr. Tillman, I hear what you're saying on that, but remember, when you look at the local control funding formula, and let's think about the LCAP you can adjust anyway. There's always cost savings. So even if we have to look at our LCAP 3 years down the road, we can make those adjustments as necessary and build those positions in there. Here's the bottom line. Coming out of the outside, on the other side of this pandemic, we have to reshift our focus and provide services to kids in schools. We got to provide social emotional support on the other side of this pandemic. Therefore, I agree with you. These are one-time monies, and we can use these one-time monies for a lot of different supports. But within that LCAP, if we have to, as a team, look at those unspent dollars, those unused dollars, those dollars that we're saving on a regular basis, we can hire the staff that we need. That's why we're going to shift slowly but surely to a service delivery model where we provide more services to kids. So again, I'm going to need over the next 6 months to get as much information as possible. And there may be adjustments to those LCAPs. The LCAP over the next 3 years where we can embed those positions in there. So I would say you have to be patient on that. And I agree that in the long term, we'll talk about at the next board meeting, yeah, we are facing an instructional deficit, but there's going to be a plan and a way for us to address that in the future. And we already have a plan, but I'm going to need some additional time. So even if we hire additional staff, and we need additional support, again, we always can make those adjustments within our LCAP if we need to on those action items. And secondly, when you say contract out, we got to be careful in contracting out because we got to make sure if we're going to be contracting services out, there has to be a correlation between those services and student achievement and outcomes. So I always want to be cautious when we say let's contract it out because with 7,000 employees, we should be able to find the individuals within. We have to see if we have the capacity within the district first. So I hear you on that piece. We're going to be very strategic. We're going to be very thoughtful. We'll come back with a plan, but we do add positions. We're going to make sure that we're able to maintain that on the other side of 23-24. I'm not sure if anybody else on the team want to jump in on that, but that's where we are with that.
I just wanted to add that as we continue to build capacity within our district, we're going to start limiting some of the outreaches to all the other companies that we've been using for professional development. There's a lot of money that's been going out, and we really need to build the capacity within our district. And so as we move toward a service delivery model, I anticipate we'll get better, and we won't need to contract out as much as we do now.
And I would never suggest that you use outside agencies for things that are not needed. When I said use outside, maybe use outside agency, it was only in the context of if you have a need, rather than hiring a full-time employee, you might be able to find an outside contractor to fulfill that need, so not to hire an employee. But this is going to be real clear. Sometimes it's actually a hindrance because of the length of time I've been on the board. Because I already know what's going to happen. You're going to have all this money. It's going to seem great, like it's Christmas for about 3 years. And then the bottom's going to fall out, and we're going to have to deal with paying for these expenses with our regular Prop 98 and LCFF. As far as I'm concerned, LCAP means nothing to me because there's no money associated with LCAP. None, zero. All the money that comes in is either Prop 98 or local control funding. And then we have this new money coming in from the feds. But I don't want to make the mistake on using the money that it says right in front of us that it's going to end on these dates. And if Mr. Sullins comes in and he says that he's willing to show on paper that we're going to have a positive certification with these additional employees and with the declining enrollment, which we know we have, then it's okay. But I think at some point in these lines that we have, there has to be a line that shows ongoing money. And to be fair to you, Mr. Urban, the problem happened before you got here. I got shocked with a budget that I wasn't expecting in the last fiscal year, and it scared me. So I'll be honest with you. So I have to have the confidence that when someone tells me that it used to be in the past that when they told me any balance was going to be super low, that it always came back higher than that, and I was willing to accept that. But when it really came back as low as they projected, that became real scary. So maybe Mr. Kostakis can get with Mr. Sullins and show me that, hey, here's why it dipped, and here's why you guys did all this deficit spending this one time, but that was one-time money, and now you're positioned in a way where you got this ongoing money where you can hire another whatever number of positions that you all want to hire, but someone has to show it to me.
Yeah, and I want to get clarity there. I agree with you 100%. The biggest concern I have, and I know Harold has the same concern, is you're right. On the other side, these are one-time dollars. On the other side of this, we have to be fiscally solvent. And our biggest concern is, yes, we are facing a structural deficit. And a lot of that, Mr. Tillman, has to do with the fact that you're losing enrollment, as we already know. That is a given right now. So, but at the same time, we agree we have to put systems and structures in place. So what we're going to try to do, like Ms. Applegate said, is look at the current dollars that they're expending average on a yearly basis on the LCAP, just say hypothetically, whatever that amount is. We're going to look in there. We have to hire those additional counselors, just say hypothetically. Then we're going to find out, can we hire them, but also where can we cut back within that, because we know we get those Prop 98 dollars. So can we cut back that place? Secondly, she's right about the contract. Some of those contracts, and you're right, way before I got here, there's contracts that are in the millions of dollars. I mean, total, there's millions of dollars in outside contractors. However, that's been ongoing for years. If there's a way where we can save money there, say like a counselor costs you $100,000 a piece and we need 10, there's $1 million. We have to figure out a way on how do we find $1 million without adding to our structural deficit. So but I'll be clear though, if we find that we cannot hire the additional personnel that we need because we're going to put ourselves deeper in the hole, then we will not hire them. Does that make sense? We will not do that because we got to be very strategic and thoughtful. So I've asked Janie, I've asked Mr. Sullins, Anna, Sandra, Marcus, and the entire team is where, if we need to hire additional positions, then where do we find those dollars in the current dollars that we're receiving? And secondly, I want to clarify on contracts. For example, we talked about student services mentors, and we're going to need those on the ground, especially for attendance and mentoring and so on. Well, we can partner, I agree with you, we can partner with Cal State, San Bernardino, because we can get those students through there. We can contract with them. And you're right, that saves us a lot of money because in the end, we don't want to hire 10 additional student services mentors, and 4 years from now we have to lay them off, where we can contract. So we've already been in contact with them. So I'm in agreement with you on what happens after 23, 24. We're very cognizant of that fact, but be patient and give me some time to think it through. But I am in agreement with you that we are not going to hire if we don't have a plan on where we're going to save those dollars at. So this way we're not laying off people. So just be patient on that. Anybody else on our team want to clarify that with Mr. Tillman?
Okay, I think that's good. And in addition to that,
I'm sorry, that was Harold.
No, we're good on that. And Dr. Flores, you wanted some clarity as well?
Yes, I appreciate what you just said, Mr. Irvin, and also Danny for bringing up the issue of making sure that we don't use this one-time money for positions. So, and I like what you said, Mr. Irvin, in terms of clarifying that we would use our LCFF funding, right? We do need counselors. So we have to embed that in our, in our LCFF so that we can sustain those positions. So that is farsighted, and that's what we have to do. So to calculate that we can sustain, the salaries, the benefits, and so forth of whoever we hire, and it has to come from our base funding. And so, Mr. Tillman has been the longest on the board, and I've been the second longest. So, and we went through very hard times. I came onto the board when we were laying people off and we were in a recession, and those were hard times. I don't want to revisit that. I don't want us to go through that. That was very difficult. And so I think that's very clear, and I'm glad that you confirmed that for Mr. Tillman and the rest of us. Also, I wanted clarity on the safe facilities and operations. There's zero funding there. Did we not get $100 million for facilities?
Dr. Flores, that's just out of these funding sources, the ESSER 2 and 3 for the current year. If you'll recall earlier in the presentation, we did a lot of stuff to prepare for a return, right? So we did the plexiglass and the PPE and all that out of ESSER 1 and some of the state funding.
Okay, so that is just ESSER. Well, because you had ESSER up there, I thought that was part of ESSER.
No, and just ESSER 2 and 3.
ESSER 3. Okay.
Yes. I should have put that up there. Thank you.
So 16.7 million for 2021 is part of the 92 million.
It's part of the 372 million. So it's part of ESSER 2, ESSER 3, and AB 86. That's what this slide shows. So the 91 million that you're referring to, Dr. Flores, was what happened last year when we were closed. All the little pots of money that we received that's already spent. That was earlier in the presentation.
2020?
1920 and 2021. And, I realize this is very confusing because normally we don't get all these different pots of money all at once, right? And so those were the things that we used to prepare our facilities over the last 14, 15 months. That was on an earlier slide at the beginning.
However, so it's not correct. The summary of ESSER, is this ESSER 2 and 3?
ESSER 2, 3, and AB 86.
Okay.
And so what we propose to put in the budget for next year is the 150.8 million. So this is a broad, like multi-year projection that you see those 3 years out. Because
Okay.
we know we're getting them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
All right, and Ms. Rosales Medina?
I just wanted to briefly say that I do appreciate Mr. Irwin's comments with regard to the counselors, and I understand the issues with ongoing, but the reality is our students need a support at the school site level. And so I just wanted to clarify with Ms. Rodriguez with regarding to the 700 counselor per 700 students at the elementary level. So do all elementary schools have one designated counselor? Just wanted to clarify with that.
Yeah, so there is a counselor at each campus, but we know that at each campus there's different enrollment numbers. So what we want to do is we want to be able to provide a better ratio, so between counselor and students. And so we're looking at concentrating at the elementary school where there seems to be more of a need.
All right, okay, good. And so I know we can, there has been a lot of overspending within the school district. So that's one thing I've noticed in the past several years that I've been on the board. And once we really look at that, we will always have that extra money where we would be saving and then putting it to use at the counseling level, because our students do need that support, especially after COVID. I just want to make sure that we really do understand that, our students have been struggling for decades at the school district level because of many issues. And so just setting that as a priority, I do appreciate the district looking at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There are no other comments at this time. So we can move
forward. Can we move to the next slide? And then I'd like to add a comment to what has just been said. So the superintendent has been very cautious about looking at what we're doing so that where we start to see a need, that we have something to offset that cost. And in what Mr. Tillman and Dr. Flores were saying, we still have to be careful because Prop 98 fluctuates so much. Right after the Great Recession, Prop 98 is the funding for education was at $47 billion, and now it's at the highest point ever. So we can never put 100% of our funding to staffing, because as soon as there's a fluctuation, then some of the things that Mr. Tillman were referring to occurs. And it's exacerbated by the declining enrollment. But the team is very, very aware of that. They know we have a structural deficit and putting a plan in place to address that so that when we come out of the pandemic, we're also addressing the structural deficit and providing the best support for our students. So I just wanted to add that. So on the May revision, this is pending state adoption. You saw this last week. You can see all the different line items. Well, it begins to look like categoricals. And generally there are strings attached, right? When the state gives you money, but you have to do X, Y, and Z. And some of these are proposed as one time, some ongoing, but rarely is it enough money to cover the cost of what they expect you to do. So we're just gonna have to be very cautious. What I've heard from the Assembly and Senate budget committees is that they're looking at some things a little different. They want to completely pay off the deferrals, and that's not on this chart. This was the May revise that we covered last week. They want to pay down some of the pension costs. So on the next slide, you'll see how that impacts us. Provide more special ed funding and a little bit more in the early education. And the governor already proposed quite a bit in the early education. But with that universal TK comes some other costs around preparing our facilities and all of the things we need to do. So there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of one-time, some ongoing, and we just don't know the whole picture yet. So we want to make sure that we have the state budget adoption because of all these variables, and then put a plan together that's sustainable. On the next slide. I want to walk through the COLA. So this current year, we did not receive a COLA. You can see that under 2021 LCFF funded COLA. And if you'll recall, a year ago, we were having a very different conversation around how the state budget looked. Remember, we were looking at a huge deficit at the state level. We did give a 2% salary increase on line 4. It was about 9.7 million. What we talk about servicing the salary schedule is ensuring that we cover step and column, 5.8 million. We did have a reprieve on the STRS and PERS a little bit this year. Health and welfare costs go up each year, and although we have a great committee that works really hard to keep those costs down, they do go up every year. State unemployment didn't go up this year, but total increases of 15.3 million, and we didn't receive a COLA. Now we do have savings from the closure, but these are ongoing costs, except possibly the unemployment. In 21-22, they're proposing to give us a COLA, so it's compounded. It's making up for last year and giving us a little extra because unemployment costs are pretty high. The rate is going up. So earlier I showed you on the ongoing funding for COLA, about 24 million for our district. Again, you go down and there's step and column, STRS and PERS, line 7, health and welfare, an unemployment rate increase that will impact us by 5 million, and a total increase of 18.8 million. So a little left over from the COLA, but that doesn't account for other things that increase, right? Our transportation contract, special education, other costs. These are just the salary schedule. So when you move to the right, you see that cumulative total. So the COLA revenue, the revenue we receive from the COLA over the 2 years, and then all the way down these costs, well, you see that it's short. It didn't cover the cost of both years. And so that's something that we have to be very careful of as we move forward, especially when we get to 22-23, and we have to recognize the loss of ADA. We will have to operate on the actual ADA we receive next year. We won't have that where we get to use 2019-20 levels prior to the pandemic. So I just wanted to illustrate that to ensure that that is clear, that the COLA doesn't, it depends on the amount of the COLA, right? If each year we got 5.07%, we would be better off. I just saw a question from Dr. Flores. We did have one-time savings this year. We did not save 30 million from transportation. We saved about 10 million. But those are one-time savings, right? And it's the ongoing costs. And so I just wanted to share the impact to COLA. And then on the final slide, Dr. Menarez covered this earlier. Again, we were going to wait for that state adoption and review the dollars and our priorities. We'll be prepared to make amendments in the 45-day budget, but we can make amendments all the time. If we need to make it more often, we can and we will. In October, we'll bring academic achievement updates. And then several board members mentioned we don't want to give a penny back. We need to make sure that we spend all of these one-time dollars. And so we'll accompany that achievement report with an expenditure report, and we'll incorporate that in all of the interims. So in the first and second interim, you'll get updates related to these one-time dollars. And again, incorporating the superintendent's entry plan, listening, and learning tour. And that wraps us up. Next slide for this evening. I think I had another question. I didn't.
For page, page 12. If you go.
I'm sorry, I was saying that all on mute.
No worries.
Page 12, Ms. Rosas Medina has that question.
Yes, and my question is regarding a number. Let me make sure I'm reading it right. It's number 3, comprehensive after school. Is this for the CAPS program?
Yeah, so under the, it's part of it, providing before and after school support. So that was part of the governor's proposal. So you can see these are all in billions. We're not sure what that will mean to us. In the May revise, it talked about it would grow each, over 5 years. We believe that the Senate and the Assembly bill will also incorporate that. So I didn't go into a lot of detail this board meeting on each of these items because it's going to change, and we're going to know something in the next couple of weeks. So this is what the governor proposed that we went over last time. But yes, Ms. Medina, the state is aware that our students are going to need a lot of support coming out of the pandemic, and we want to ensure all sorts of supports before school, during school, after school. And so I'm sure with the one-time dollars that the state has that they didn't expect, that they're going to provide some of these more funding to us.
All right, thank you for that. And I do want to make a suggestion regarding the CAPS funding. So before I was a board member, there was issues with the CAPS program at certain schools, not across the board. It was regarding, it was being more used as a babysitting versus trying to do enrichment programs. I've seen this back when I was involved, like I said before, I was a school board member. I'm looking at it now. I've heard a few concerns just recently with regards to CAPS. I'm wondering if we're able to create a task force or something to really reevaluate how we're doing the after school, before and after school programs, to make sure that it's great money, it's great purpose, but we want to make sure that the enrichment happens across the board to all school sites and the way it should be done. I know some great sites that are doing it, creating great programs and so forth, but there's other sites that may need that extra support. I would like to make sure that as we're spending more money into these programs, that we're evaluating and showing the outcomes based and so forth. So if there's a way we can do a task force or just really creating a strategic plan for it, I would like to do that. Thank you.
So in response to that, Mrs. Rosales Medina, we are looking at our CAPS programs to make sure, because at this time, you're right, they are not at every campus for various reasons. And so some of them, because there's different funding sources and different timeframes in which different schools got funded. And so we are looking at all of our contracts with CAPS to see if we're getting the best value for those programs. We are also working with Ed Services to make sure that we are extending learning opportunities for students. As we learn more about how do we make our schools more attractive, we're looking at how do we embed STEAM in our after-school programs so that every single campus in our district has STEAM programs to augment the day programs for our schools. So absolutely, we're looking at that. As you well know, Dennis Warman is retiring. And so as we get in a new director and really restructuring and reimagining and being innovative, we do see great things coming out of CAPS.
Right, great, perfect. Thank you so much for doing that.
And Ms. Medina, I wanted to add to that as I was talking with the team, and I think that you brought up something that's very critical for us, and it also impacts our enrollment. So one of the things we've been talking about is we want to make sure, again, as you know, that every school has to be a good school. So we want to make sure every school has an after-school program, but an after-school STEAM program. So we want to make sure every school in the district, as we move forward, and again, be patient because I need time to do my listening and learning tour, but the goal is every school to be a STEAM academy, every school throughout the entire district. That will not only attract more students, but what it's going to do is, obviously impact their enrollment. There's going to be more students wanting to be in our schools. At every school is a STEAM academy, and that starts with the after-school program at every school throughout the entire district. So I would like every school to be a STEAM academy. That's going to be the plan that we're going to be focusing on, and then we're going to review our entire after-school program. I've already tasked Ms. Dr. Rodriguez and the rest of the team to start looking at that, reviewing all those contracts, so we can have a robust program. And then at some point, some of those programs can be embedded during the day. And so that'll be part of our overall plan, is to revamp, to revise, to revisit. But the goal is every school will have a STEAM academy going in the future. But again, it's going to take some time. But again, be patient with that. But we shouldn't have one school with a solid program, then another school around the corner that does not. That's not equity and that's not fair. So we're going to make sure. So I I do hope that the board supports us in these efforts when we do that, because that obviously will create people to be upset and have issues and concerns with that. But we will go to a model to where every school will have a strong after-school solid STEAM related program.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Tillman.
So a few things. Can we back up to the slide with the big numbers on it? This one. So just so I'm clear, if we don't spend the $102 million by 2023, do we lose it?
That's my understanding, Mr. Tillman. That's the spend date that has to be adhered to.
And then just in a technical perspective, do they give us the money on the front end, or do we have to spend the money and then bill it back?
So that's a great question. We just got notified. I'm looking for it. I think we're getting 25% of ESSER 2 next month, and ESSER 3, 25%, I believe, in September, and I can get you the exact information. Then they start to reimburse, is my understanding. But I will get clarification from both Ms. King and Mr. Komnick on that.
And just for clarification, do the two different named categories of money have different restrictions?
So they generally have the same restrictions, and we can send you the link to CDE that shows you each ESSER 2 can be spent on the same things as ESSER 1 plus some items. ESSER 3 can be spent on the same things as ESSER 1 and 2 plus some items. And so we can get that to you and the link to you. So
and then, so I think at some point, I know it takes time, so you know I'm impatient, that's just my nature. But if at some point we could get those what the qualifications are for spending the money, and then if we know that date, then I'm assuming that Mr. Irwin's going to lead the charge to inform staff, and then make sure we find ways to spend it in a way that's going to benefit the district. And if it truly is possible you can lose the money, then that needs to be, that's important, right? So we need to make sure we have a plan to expend the money that we're going to get for sure, and make sure money doesn't go back. Because I can't imagine our district not having a need to spend this money. But I do know that it's tough to spend money, because one is communicating it to the right people and then getting the feedback. And that's why I think it's great that Mr. Irwin's going to have this listening thing, but also make sure we involve everyone. But then if we can have those timelines so we don't miss those dates in terms of being able to expend as much of that money as possible, if not all of it. Okay.
Mr. Tillman, I think Mr. Sullins just put the link in the chat. But a lot of it is just the things exactly that the team has put together. Learning loss, mental health support, summer school, before and after school, some needs on the facilities. So those are all the items that and areas that these fundings can be spent on.
Perfect.
And the link and the link was just put in the chat.
Perfect. And I heard what Ms. Abigail Rosales-Medina said about, wanting to have these enhanced. And I heard Mr. Irwin talking about the STEAM after school programs, but I hope we don't lose sight of where we're at today. And this could be a win-win for parents. I hope we're not going to have these big plans, but then have waiting lists for the existing CAPS program. If you have the funding already, unless you can't find the staffing or the organizations to host the CAPS program, then there shouldn't be a waiting list for CAPS at the existing CAPS programs. So I hope somebody's dealing with that practical piece of it, because I don't want to get the call saying, hey, I can't get my child in the CAPS because they're on a waiting list. Unless I'm missing something. Is the funding not there to ensure we don't have waiting lists?
Well, so when we go ahead. Sorry.
So in response to that, some schools, as I mentioned earlier, have different funding sources. Dennis Warman has been working on making sure that there is parity so that we do not have waiting lists. And so this past LCAP season, we were working on that. So we anticipate not having those waiting lists for the next school year. We know that's our problem.
Right, because the key is when you have the money, somehow has to be communicated to the right people that they have the money. You'll actually have people who don't know they have the money to spend, and then everyone loses out on that, right? And then can we go back to the slide where well, first let me say, in all this, you guys have a lot of terminology that doesn't mean anything to me from a practical perspective, whether you say equity or emotion or whatever. I don't know what you're talking about doing there, right? I don't know about if you're talking about providing more counseling or what type of help, what classes for kids, or exactly what it is. But I will say this: I think with this money, some of the big problems we have should be addressed, if only to prove that the problem can be solved with additional money. Because if we can, for instance, reduce our chronic absentee rate for certain groups, that I think is just terrible. And we always talk about not having enough resources, then I think this is a time we should work on reducing those numbers, even if it means using a lot of this money, just so we can prove if you have the money, you can reduce chronic absentee rate. And that's going to benefit students. It's just sad to me to see thousands and thousands of kids with more than 18 or more absences in the district. And then we say we haven't talked to those families. That's a tragedy. One of the things that impressed me about Mr. Irvin is the district he came from. He talked about a program he had where they use social workers combined with student services folks to know the students and the family and provide them with the information and help where they were at any given time. That's what's going to make the difference in our district. And we can do that with one-time money. So I hope that's part of the plan. And
Absolutely, it is. And, we've been talking a lot with Mr. Irwin around how do we have a more comprehensive approach to addressing it. And these funds that are coming to the district are windfall. But if we can't make a difference with this money, we got a problem. And so it's all hands on deck. We have the resources. Now it's making sure that we have systems and structures, that we have accountability built in so that we can meet the needs of kids. The SEL, as we're talking through it, it's not just, it's having teachers informed on how to deal with students who are coming from traumatic backgrounds. How do we help students understand that life at this particular moment is temporary and you can overcome any obstacle that comes your way, and building in assignments and group work where they learn perseverance and grit. And so all of those things that's what SEL, that's part of SEL, but it takes a different, very deliberate approach with our teachers, because many of them are doing it, but we want to make sure that we're taking it to scale. In addition to what you had mentioned around the social workers, that is something that we're looking at within the service delivery model, where we are deploying folks instantaneously. So once we run reports to find out who is not at school, we're deploying teams of people out in the community at that particular moment to find out what's going on. And even though there may be challenges with families because they don't have jobs or health concerns, being able to have a resource that will be deployed at that moment to remove barriers and excuses, because we need kids at school. If they're not in school, how are they going to learn? How are they going to take advantage of all these opportunities that we have if they're not coming to school? So those are things that we are planning for. Rome wasn't built in a day, and we're committed to making sure that it's happening. And Mr. Irwin has been very clear in the direction and has been very inspirational in trying to build those systems and really pushing us to look at things in a more deliberate, in looking at efficiency. So those are things definitely that we're working on.
Great, I agree with you 100%. I would say, rather than excuses, a lot of times there are actual reasons why people are having the problems too.
Absolutely, you're right.
Right.
Mr. Tillman, can I add real quickly, because you're hitting it head on, and I like that. I just want to be very clear very quickly that when we talk about the service delivery model, when you talk about the people on the ground, we've already been building behind the scenes that service delivery model that will come to the board and present as soon as I have a chance to meet with the board president and the board vice president in the future. It's going to be sooner than later, but be patient, because one of the things we've talked about is, like you said, that youth services specialist. That's where I talked about the partnership with Cal State, San Bernardino. If once we get those youth services specialists on the ground, there'll be one in each elementary, middle school feeder pattern in clusters. Those individuals will be trained to do check and connect. Those individuals will be on the ground working with a caseload of 20 to 30 students who are assigned. Then we're going to have student services mentors. They will have a cluster of schools. They'll be on the ground. Then you'll have your social workers, one every 2 to 3 schools. Remember, we don't have to hire all these additional people. This is going to be built into the service delivery model because the staff is already within the district. I just need time to go on the listening learning tour. And meanwhile, simultaneously, we will build out the service delivery model. So they'll be on the ground, but we have to remember, we have to have the right people in the right place to make this work, because we can't just put people in systems that don't want to be in these systems. So we're going to pull it off. You just got to be patient on that. I need 6 months. Well, 6 months, but simultaneously we'll be building that service delivery model. But I will tell you, August 2nd, we have to have a team on the ground to deal with attendance, chronic absenteeism, social emotional learning. But at the same time, we have to deal with college and career readiness, A through G requirements, and then STEAM. So all that happens in a service delivery model. I just need the board to be patient. And when we share it with you, the most important thing on this whole budget, you have to remember, once the board identifies those 5 or 6 goals, the board has to support us and ensure that we're aligning those dollars to those goals. Because what we don't want to do is be having, everybody got all these different goals out there, but I want to focus on, if the board says social emotional learning, our support and services goes to that. If they say college and career readiness, and embedded in there is dual enrollment in A through G, we focus there. Just long as we stay focused, because what's going to happen when you go on this tour of closing this gap and providing support for students is sometimes people don't like that because it impacts them. And I'm gonna need the board to continue to stay strong and with us the entire way, because the board is at a great place. And so just be patient on it. We will get that to you in the next 2 to 3 weeks, what the model looks like, and then you can tear it apart, and we'll keep building it until we get the board's blessing on it. And we'll make it work, but be patient with us.
And let me end with, thank you for that. Let me end with the last slide. Can you turn, I hate to end on a sad note, but can you turn to the slide, Ms. Christakis, where you showed there you go, that one. So this is the reality about ongoing money, and this is where we're at. So right now, Ms. Christakis is saying that for the 2021-22 budget year, unless I'm missing something, that we have we're going to have to deficit spend by $9.9 million now of ongoing money. Now, it may not be a big deal this time because you have this one-time money, but my point is there are dates. You're already showing the dates when the one-time money ends. So my point is, for every position that you add, you're going to increase this number unless Mr. Irv was able to do what he's suggesting. And I will say, we did have ongoing money designated for LCAP expenditures that were one-time expenditures. So you're right. If you had some contracts in there or some professional services stuff in there, there was some money in there that was ongoing. But you'd have to show that, and Mr. Sull have to show it on paper, and then he'd have to show where this number is going away before we start adding positions. Unless I'm missing something. Someone can say, hey, you don't know what you're talking about. You could add 30 counselors and 20 nurses, and this red number would not go up if we didn't do anything different. Am I right or wrong about that, Ms. Christakis?
So, Mr. Tillman, you are correct. What we want to know, though, is how does our enrollment look, right? And that's a huge indicator. So right now we've been declining, and of course we declined quite a bit this year. And I know Dr. Rodriguez and her team really not only want to get all those kids back, she also wants to improve the attendance rate. All those things will help. So yes, Mr. Tillman, we have to be able to sustain it over time.
And can I make one thing clear? Because it was a good thing, but it could turn out to be a bad thing. And that was they funded us at the previous year's ADA for the last 2 years.
Correct.
And even that's going to go away. So
Yes.
you could have a huge hit. And when does that go away? What school year?
22-23. And so you'll see next week in the multi-year projection where, you know, we have to use some of these ESSER funds to help with the budget deficit over the next couple of years. We just have to. And so you'll see that. We'll share that with you, which allows the district time to respond, right? We're going to know in October what the enrollment is. And so with your first interim report, we'll be able to say this is what it is. Right now, we're assuming of the 2,100 students that did not show up this year, that 1,000 of them will be coming back. So you're right.
And let me make it very clear what the word respond means. Respond normally means that you would accommodate the loss in revenue through attrition, meaning that you would have people that were retiring and leaving and you wouldn't fill those positions. So correct. I'm confused when I hear people say, we have this. You may realize that because of lower ADA, you have even less money than what this is showing, but at the same time, we're going to hire a bunch of new people. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, Mr. Tillman, so you got a couple of things going on there. So I hear you, but you got a couple of things going on there. And you're right, and so is Janie. Both of you are correct. But here's your issue, as an outsider. You have an enrollment issue. So you got a couple of issues there. One, you have the enrollment issue. You're right. You lost 2,200, but you're averaging, Janie, about 1,000 a year. So we have to find a way to stop the structural deficit. Yes, you can use those ESSER dollars, and Janie's right, over 3 years, you could probably get rid of that deficit by the end of 23, 24, Janie, correct me if I'm wrong, if you use some of those ESSER dollars. That will, but even if you do that, like I talked to Janie about, even if you do that, you still got a structural deficit ongoing because you're still losing enrollment. So therefore, we have to put the teams on the ground in this service delivery model, one, to increase enrollment, get to those 3 and 4-year-olds right away, get back those, make sure we get back those students who we lost to enrollment, because again, and then remember the additional dollars in that trailer bill, which we haven't talked about yet, for TK expansion and pre-K. If we can increase our enrollment and reduce that 1,000 students per year, then at the same time, we have to have STEAM academies. We got to find a way to attract and retain more students to stay in the district. And the third issue that you have that we have to really look at as an organization is we have 5,500 students or more or less in charters. That's about $70 million. So then that in itself would, if those students came back to the district, that would wipe out your deficit, right? But so ongoing though, you got to remember, ongoing, you're right, Mr. Tillman, at the end of the 3 years, even if you use the ESSER dollars to reduce your deficit, you still got enrollment decrease. So I have to find a way, I'm gonna say we, because all of us together, we have to find a way to increase enrollment and attract and retain students and make all of our schools the best schools in the county. So this way, no student wants to leave our system. So we got to stop the students from leaving the district, because right now 1,000 a year, 3 years from now, if it continues, you're going to be at 4,000. You do the times 13,100. That's a whole nother number that we're not even anticipating, because we're anticipating next year to stop the $1,000. The lack of.
But Mr. Irvin, sometimes declining enrollment is a trend across the state.
Correct.
So if it happens to be a trend across the state, there's virtually nothing you can do that's going to change that trend. Now,
absolutely.
So it's a reality that we're going to have to deal with, and it may be a reality that we cannot affect. We can if the momentum is going that direction. I agree. There's always things you can do to get more students back to school. That's what I'm talking about, even in terms of the chronic absenteeism. A lot of those students end up dropping out altogether. So you're right, there are ways we can bring kids back to school, and that's a win-win for everybody, because we're helping students, and we end up getting more funding for those students. So I love that. But I don't want to lose sight of the fact that when we go to CSBA, you'll hear that there's declining enrollment in 80% of the districts. Only 20% have increased enrollment. I came on board when we had increased enrollment, but that was going across the whole spectrum. So I don't know where it's going to be at, but the last report I read worldwide, the big phenomenon is not having enough people. The birth rate across the world is going down, right? I'm not saying that's impacting us locally, but there is a possibility that we may not be able to, we may have to deal with having a declining enrollment for a while. And we can do it as long as we're realistic about it. The only way I get in trouble with this, if I don't address it now. To me, this is the very best time to address this issue because we have the funding and we have the time. The only way you lose on this issue is when you don't address it early. If you're talking about it 2 years from now, it's too late. So as bad as it sounds right now, it'll be 10 times worse if we add a bunch of employees and then we wake up and realize we don't have the funding to pay for the employees because even Dr. Flores said we did layoffs. This district has never really laid off people because we managed it through attrition.
All right.
The worst we've done is a whole bunch of notices. So I just want to make sure that's where I want to keep it. I don't want to have to laugh a whole bunch of people.
All right, let me let the patiently waiting other board members, Dr. Hill, and then Mr. Tillman, if I need to come back to you, I will. So Dr. Hill.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. I first want to say to Mr. Irvin, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you here. And Mr. Sullins, thank you. We look forward to working with you as well. And the one thing, well, a couple of things. I want to thank Karen for sending out the budget workshop information. And maybe we should get it a little sooner so some of these questions can be answered before you do your presentation on the 8th. That might help and cut down on some of the conversation. But the other thing, I'm just so proud that our 3 R's have changed, from what we have known since the early days of school. And I think that's good. I know a lot of people say we want to go back to normal. I don't know why, because with the number of kids we had missing school, getting D's and F's, who wants to go back to that? The kids don't. So I'm glad we're going to focus on the kids in the beginning. And I just want to say to Jane, and thank you for the presentation. And, again, it might be helpful if we could get it, so everybody will have a chance to look at it and maybe can answer some of those questions at that time, because as people were asking questions, I knew some things were embedded there. So thank you. Thanks to all. And again, a good presentation.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Flores.
Thank you, Madam President. I wanted to just ask Mr. Irvin and Janie, can we get how much money we saved this year and how much is going to roll over? How much we saved in vacancies in terms of salaries, benefits, and so forth, to address the deficit, because that last slide only dealt with salaries.
Correct. So you're right, Dr. Flores. We do have savings, but that's one-time savings. And so we're going to do the estimated actuals. That's where, Ms. King and her team look at where we are right now, and we project where we're going to end the year. You're going to get a glimpse of that next week.
Okay, good.
And then the final savings will come to you in September. So we will have that one-time savings that helps with what you saw, but that servicing of the salary schedule is ongoing. And so the other savings that we experienced this year, obviously a lot of that was one time because of the closure.
Right. Because I think we had savings in utilities, we had savings in transportation, and in a lot of other areas where we didn't have expenditures and vacancies, not filling positions and so forth. So I would appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, and Ms. Ceballos? Ms. Ceballos, it sounds like you're Your volume might be off a little, but go ahead and I'll let you know. Yeah, you're real staticky and we can't hear you. Okay. You're gonna try it now off camera?
You sound like a chipmunk.
Yeah, we can't. Did she go completely away? Where is she?
Can you hear me?
Yes, just get a little loud. It's clear. So can you do it louder or closer? Okay. We can hear you better.
A little bit?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Well, good evening. I don't want to take too much time. Mr. Tillman, you made me forget all my questions already. Kidding. But I did have a few. This is really good conversation, actually, and I really enjoy the back and forth because there's a lot of information that obviously I'm new to, and so hearing different perspectives really helps me out. I just want to make sure that on the it was page 11 of the slides, that we are able to. So I know you went down, for number 1, you talked about training teachers, purchasing curriculum, adding staff to provide support in SEL, and then you went to number 2 and number 3 and number 4. You mentioned curriculum for almost all of them, with the exception of number 4. And I just want to, is there ever overlap in purchasing curriculum? So are you purchasing different curriculums for each one of these categories, or is there like one-time purchase that you can then use, on 1, 2, and 3? Does that make sense?
So, Ms. Ceballos, sometimes, as you know, we have a base program, which we consider our tier 1 instruction that all of our students are involved in. But many times, and I'm sure on the other side of this pandemic, we see additional needs. For instance, an example would be an English learner. So English learners, of course, have everything that's in tier 1 for instruction, but then they need above and beyond. So they may need language programs. They may need something to help them understand concepts better. Within our African-American student support, we have other programs that may be more engaging. So at times, these are supplemental programs to supplement our base program. So there are different needs, different grade levels. Some students are not at grade level. They may need something to help push them up a little more. So all of these are basically supplemental programs because we have a strong tier 1 instruction, but some students just need more or different type of support, or it's multimodal or something different, a different way that they learn.
Okay, and the reason why, in addition to that, Ms. Ceballos, so like the SEL has different levels. So we have one for elementary, middle, and high. There's also one for adults. And then as we're also looking at curriculum, we're looking at even supplemental curriculum around digital supports as well. So it's not just the actual textbook, but also a new curriculum that we're going to be using for the virtual academy.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. The reason why I ask is because, well, I don't know how much money is usually spent on curriculum, and I just wanted to make sure if this was, something that was shared across, like purchased 1 or 2 different types of curriculums, and then, it was shared across these 3 sections. But it sounds like there's multiples that you need to buy. So just as a reminder, if you can please itemize, those things on here so that if there is overlap, that we can see where the overlap is, and if there isn't, we can see where it was spent, right? So moving forward with the ESSER and the AB 86, that's what I would like to see under each of these categories, and then also going back to the funding that has already been spent. Also, I would like to see an overview. Itemized kind of summary of where the money was spent, how it was spent, and then outcomes associated to that, right? So I'm always going to be asking for outcomes. How are they linked? Did we spend it? How did we spend it? And what was the outcome? What did it do for our students if it was spent around our students? So that takes me back a little bit to the expanded learning opportunities grant that was just approved this past August, right? I was just looking at the plan again, and I had it up at the plan that was submitted, the expanded learning opportunities grant plan that was submitted last meeting, and I just want to make sure that we are going to be getting some form of additional update to this in terms of the monitoring aspect of it. What is the outcomes that we want to see, right? And how, when we come back and I look at this again, at this ELOP grant plan, I want to make sure that the money that was used was tied to whatever goal, and that we were able to see the outcome, right? Did we achieve the goal that we wanted to achieve through this? And looking through it, I didn't really see anything stating. So for instance, and I know you guys don't have it because you have it, but maybe not up, but on page 12, it's talking about the expenditure plan, right? And you have the amounts. So extended instructional learning time, you have, for instance, 24 million. And so then you also have a category that says actual expenditures, and it says will be provided when available. So I just wanted to make sure that we are being provided exactly what it was spent on as we're going, because I want to always ask, are we getting to the goal that we want to get to? And if not, why not?
Okay, Mr. Bias, let me jump in there for a moment. I hear where you're going with that now. So on each and every action item and each and every, that's a massive amount of work and that the staff would have to put into that. That doesn't happen overnight. So what has to happen first is we have to be able to identify clearly what the goals are. The board have to determine what are the three major goals. Once they determine what those three major goals is, our job as a district to determine here's the priorities, and on each of those priorities there's strategies, and then we'll lay out what are those indicators of success. What are the outcomes? We'll lay those out. But again, that doesn't happen ongoing. That's typically the board selects a certain time during the year when they want to see those reports. It could happen at the end of the first semester. It can happen at the end of every quarter. So, but if you're asking for it ongoing, we're gonna have to get clarity on that, because ongoing, there's about 30, 40, 50, there's hundreds, there could be hundreds of action items. So we're gonna have to get clarity. What I would, and I'll have the team jump in there, but we got to get clarity around that, because for example, we gave you all that based on everything that the district has done previously, you would get 20,000, you get about 20 binders full of information. So it's got to be very clear. Typically you have an overarching goal. The board has already said that one of the goals going forward is, I don't know, school climate and culture. Well, there we can write a goal and we can talk about what's the outcomes that we want to see with that. And then we'll tell you, okay, here are going to be the three major priorities. The district has already indicated they want social emotional learning. We're going to have to be very clear on what is that? What are the outcomes that we want to expect? The second one was a safe, clean, and secure environment. Okay, then we have to talk about what was the outcome? What is the board expecting to see? And the third one is a positive learning environment. So we just got to be very clear on what those expectations are, because remember, under each of those priorities, our programs, initiatives, or strategies. So if we did outcomes on, we usually do an outcome on the overarching goal. And if we did it on every single action item, that could take, that would be a massive amount of work. Now, can we do it? Absolutely. But I would recommend going forward that we wait and give me some time to do the listening and learning tour, identify what those goals are going forward, because again, the board evaluates me off those goals, and then I can talk with the team and we can come back based on those goals that are currently the LCAP goals. We could probably give the board an update. And Dr. Rogers, I'm not sure when you do those, but those three goals that you currently selected for the LCAP, we could probably do that around October, November. It's typically around the time when we present to the board an update on where our progress report. Dr. Menards, can you help me with that? Because I'm not sure how you do it here in the district, but I hear what Dr. Ceballos is asking for. If it's a specific program or initiative, yes, but I need clarity if you're talking all action items or some of those.
Yeah, and if I can jump in very quickly, Ms. Ceballos, I know that for AB 86, you're specifically talking about the Expanded Learning Opportunities Grant. As Janie had mentioned earlier, there is an academic achievement part that we will have to report based on those funds that were allocated to us.
Okay.
So you will be getting that because that is part of the grant. So Ms. Christakos mentioned that there is a time in the month, and I don't remember, Ms. Christakos, which month, but specifically for AB 86, the extended learning grant that you were asking about, we will have an academic report that needs to go with that grant to show exactly the outcomes of that funding.
Yes, and so I would add to that, and to your response, Mr. Irvin, we have not had yet a regular update to the board on LCAP in the past. However, the plan moving forward is to have that, and we were planning on doing that with in October, to Ms. Applegate's point, that in the timeline of what we shared, that we would do an expenditure update as well as the outcomes at that point. And we will have had data from summer program as well as then data from our students from the entry into school, right, our pre-assessment. So we'll have some data sets that we'll be able to share with you, Ms. Ceballos, and the board. And then the only other piece I would add is, and so to kind of put an exclamation point on what Mr. Irvin was saying, we want the goal should be broad enough that we can, it takes many different actions combined together to move the outcomes that we want for students. So one individual action typically doesn't work for every child. And so you wouldn't want us to be giving you the individual actions because you wouldn't get the picture that you're looking for. You want to see overall, for instance, our students, is the early literacy growing? How quickly are students capturing any, accelerating their ability and their early literacy? We would be doing many steps and actions to get all students there. For some students, a set of actions will work. For another set of students, they're going to need that and more, right? So that's one of the reasons why you want it to be in a broader sense, as Mr. Irvin is speaking about, because it takes so many different steps in order to get students there and or strategies based off the learning style of the student.
Thank you. And I do understand that. I guess I'm, kind of jumping the gun, and I'm very eager, I guess, if you will, to start seeing some of this move forward, as I'm sure all of you are, because it's just been so long in my experience, and I feel like I've felt for so long that we make plans, but somehow they fall through the cracks, right? And then we get to the end of, like Mr. Tillman was saying, we get to the end where we're talking about it 2 years, later, and we didn't think ahead, or we didn't anticipate. So that's part of the reason why I'm saying, okay, what specifically are we going to be doing or looking at? And I want to make sure that we are clear on that. So as a board, we do need to come together, and I don't have clarity on what some of those are currently. So I guess my question would be, like, we're going to be meeting Mr. Irvin sometime in July to come together and bring those, those goals, clarify.
We're gonna have a board retreat, but yeah, so that'll be so here's what we'll do. Definitely, since the district has already selected the goals, they have the 3 LCAP goals, the ones that Dr. Menares talked about today. Let me go back with the team to look at those 3 goals, to identify what are those major priorities are, and then talk to them about what were those outcomes that they expected, because that's the conversation that we're already having. And then find out a time to when we can come back to the board to talk about what those goals are, what those key priorities are, and then what outcomes will we expect, what are going to be, and we got to create some key performance indicators. But so give us some time on that. I'm only day 2, but I'll get there for you. Trust me. Give me some time, because I'm with you. I'm always eager. However, we got to be strategic and thoughtful, and we want to move with a sense of urgency, but we also want to be strategic and move with patience, because if we move too fast, then it could create some issues. So I'll get back with you and the board on that. Secondly, yes, I will get to the board at the end of my superintendent listening and learning tour around probably November, but before that, we'll definitely have a high level update to the board around these current goals that they have already selected. So let me work on that. This is day 2. I'll add that to my agenda with the board to discuss that. I just need some patience on that. That's all I'm asking. And then I'll get you what you're asking for.
Okay, and the reason, again, why I'm asking all of these questions is because then I can come back and tie it to the money, right? I don't know yet what it is, and so how to discuss,
right,
financially. So to me, this right now means really nothing.
Right.
I have concretes in a lot of the questions that I'm asking, and I know that you're asking, for patience, and you're just coming in, and I get all of that. I just really want to make sure that we have clear goals, which I didn't feel coming in, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Ms. Ceballos, that's exactly, we're actually saying exactly the same thing. We're saying, so we know there are some basic's not the word, but some needs that we know our students need. We know the research is saying this, our community is saying this. We know social emotional learning or just, wellness supports for our students, that's necessary. We know that we need to have some academics accelerations, that's necessary. We know those things, but to your point, we don't want to just allocate money and just spend without being clear on where we're going in relation to those elements, right? So what we're saying is very much the same thing you're saying. We've got our short-term goals, if you will. Mr. Irvin will do his listening and learning campaign. We've got, we're going to assess actually where our students are at. All of that will come together, and we will then be bringing that back to the board with much more clarity, intentionality, and the monitoring systems behind it.
Okay, perfect. So then good. We're on the same page, it sounds like, in terms of that. And then just very lastly, I do want to get a counselor to student ratio, what that currently looks like across the district, as well as a school psychology to student ratio as well. And that's it. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Bias. And Ms. Rosas Medina, you have a comment, and then you indicated you also have a question specific.
Yes. With regards to the outcomes, thank you, Madam President. Regarding to the outcomes, we've been working on this for many years, and I know, and that's my question goes back to Dr. Volcomer, is that looking at outcomes based for vendors and so forth. And then even within our own school district. So we have, and maybe this is something good for Mr. Irwin to know, is that we have been working on it. I know Dr. Volcomer has been working on this. And I'm curious to find out, as you're leaving, Dr. Volcomer, and I really going to miss some of the things that you already know automatically within the school district, who will be taking over that? Because it seems like even with a few of the staff, they're not familiar with it, because it shouldn't have to come from me asking you. It should have been someone already should have heard about it. So who would be taking that role with looking at the outcome space?
Thank you, Ms. Rosales Medina. Great question. I'm gonna approach it actually from two angles. For vendors specifically, board, you'll remember you asked for, and we developed a program evaluation for vendors. Barbara Richardson was a major player in that. And then just about the time really we were getting knee deep into that work, COVID hit, and then Barbara left, obviously. And so Michelle Cleveland, by nature, would be the one to pick up the ball and start working through the program evaluation process for our vendors. It's very well defined. It's very clear. You'll remember a couple of years ago when we put it together, we had your input, we had input from the vendors, we had input from our internal stakeholders to build a system that we think will work, so that when you're asked to make a decision about a vendor, it's really about outcomes. And so even though that person may be a wonderful person in the community, and we love them, but their program isn't producing, you can say, this is not about you personally, this is about your program, and either you got to get your program up to speed, or we're not going to be able to buy it anymore. And so we do have that in place. we probably need to kind of re-kickstart it just because.
Right.
And Dr. Volkemer, just so that you know, I have been meeting with Mr. Komnick and with Ms. Cleveland, and we are looking at the process where what we're looking at are the metrics. So what specifically are we using to measure success? Because some of that can be quantitative, some of it is qualitative. So we need to kind of take a look at what metrics we're using, but we have already met on it. And so the system is still there. As with other systems, we're trying to improve them and streamline them so that they're not as labor intensive, but we have some good metrics to be able to judge the work of the vendors.
Thank you, Ms. Applegate. And then the other thing I would add, board, to keep in the discussion is you've worked very hard over the last number of years on key performance indicators. You'll remember years and years ago when the original community engagement plan came out, we had like, I don't know, 40 or 50 key performance indicators. We were way too ambitious. And then we've slowly but surely culled it down to a workable number that's exactly aligned to the state accountability system. And you'll remember that you get a monthly update on one of those KPIs at typically the second board meeting of each month. If you want to continue that process so that those high level indicators, graduation rate, dropout rate, A to G rate, suspension and expulsion, citation, all those things that are, really high level and typically wind up in the news, you get regular information on those. And then tied to those here's the data, and we always provide it to you by program and by student group. So you know that it's not one group carrying another, and we can really approach equity issues. And then we always talk about what we're going to do next and what it will cost. So you have much of this system in place. Mr. Irvin is very skilled in terms of implementation and improvement science, and so he'll be able to add to that and work with you to build that system and make it more robust and probably more clear.
Right, and then I appreciate you giving that update so that way Ms. Ceballos can see that we have a model out there. So then transitioning that model, and I thank you, Ms. Applegate, for also sharing how you're trying to look at the metrics. And then once we have that solidified, then it's how do we move that towards other departments as well. And it'll be an easy transition to getting an outcomes-based report through action items and consent items and so forth. The intention is how we're using our money and how we're spending our money wisely. And we can't make that executive decision if we don't know how these programs are working. So we are moving that direction. I just want to make sure before Dr. Volkemer leaves that the district is continuing that. And I'm glad to hear Ms. Applegate is working on that. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions, and pretty much you guys answered everything I was going to say, but I do want to emphasize, because I just wrote down again on those, and I mentioned this to you, Mr. Irvin, about how we pre-COVID, we had KPIs and we would get regular updates, and the request was to get those updates not at the end of the year, but throughout the year, so we can gauge what we needed to correct and what we needed to make adjustments early on. So that's a practice that is kind of, already here embedded, and maybe you can tweak it or get with the team and see what works. But that is how we're able to see that information ahead. COVID, think about it, it's been over a year and we just had to stop, pause, and everything was about COVID. But we were regularly getting those things that as Dr. Volkemer worked towards, and it really worked because it allowed us to give input on those specific things, not everything all at the same time, because it's a lot. But when we break it down, you're going to speak on this tonight, it was very helpful. And then the only other thing that I would add to is, and it's been said, so I won't go on and on about it, but we definitely want to be able to look at the funding that we have coming in and just get our wellness centers to scale or add to, or whatever we need to do. I mean, already prior to receiving this money, we were receiving awards on it. We've been pretty much in the forefront of it when others weren't. And so having the framework of it without the other things that come with it, now's the time ever. And we know how much it was needed. And I can't emphasize enough how our board already foresaw that prior to even this happening, where we're anticipating what is it going to look like and how is it going to look. So I again would say, as you build that out, to show us what are we going to do, what are we going to add, and how can we make the wellness centers just really a reality here in our district as well. So I'm not seeing any other, Dr. Flores, okay, so before we move to our 3.2. Dr. Irvin is going to, or Ms. Doc Irvin is going to ask a question. It's not going to spend a lot of time on it, but Dr. Volkemer, I don't know if you might be more abreast to Dr. Flores's question. I know we talked about it, I think a week or two ago, and you had shared some information with me, so.
Great. So the question for those of you, those who can't see it, is, as our buildings sat empty for a long time, we know what happens to empty buildings, right? Critters find their way in and do some, not so fun things. And so we've been very mindful and intent on that in terms of bringing people back. And that's really the best way to keep critters out, is when people are shuffling around, they go other places. I'll turn it over to Janie to talk about some of the specific actions that we've taken to make sure that our buildings are safe for our team members.
We did have specific locations that you may be referring to that we've worked very closely with owners of the building and surrounding buildings. So that is pretty much under control. It's not perfect, right? And I know Sam and Joe and the team have worked closely with our in-house folks, as well as where we need to contract to get this all under control. So I haven't heard anything recently, and we've had people coming back. So I will check, touch bases with the team, Dr. Flores, but I haven't heard anything lately.
Well, I get notices and I get intel from different people, and I'm not going to tell you who, and I refer them back to the principal to report them to you. So,
and it's not work orders then, and that's how
it's not just one or two, it's several. So that's probably why you haven't seen them, but there are rodents everywhere. and I don't know how you get rid of them. I don't know how you get rid of them, but I mean, they're nesting. I get pictures of different things. So I just refer them back to, letting their principals know, or whoever, so that they can get rid of them. So, but it is problematic.
So I tell everyone, don't leave food out, whatever you do. If you have a snack, don't leave it out, because they'll find it. But thank you, Dr. Flores, and I know that
they're eating cardboard and paper. They're eating cardboard and paper. So, and cords. Our cords, the computer cords, electrical cords, etc. So anyway, hopefully those work orders get, I don't know how you expedite them, but
those are expedited, yes.
Yeah, I think you need to maybe send out a notice that for them to, start reporting it, so that they can address it, because I think the droppings are not good and they carry diseases. So.
Thank you, Dr. Flores, for that. Okay, and so please put that at the top. I saw you. I just was going to say again, please put that at the top of the list. And Mr. Irvin, you're hearing it as well. So
Yeah, and I was going to say that because it's a special meeting on the budget. That's not an agendized topic. If we're going to go on that, I would say that we would have to bring that to another meeting.
If you could just notate.
I'll just put that on our list.
Just put it on the note, just the note.
All right, because okay, thank you.
Yes, just a note. Mr. Tillman?
It's related to the safety of the buildings, Mr. Irvin.
Well, I'll take it from a budget perspective. I just want to make sure that Dr. Flores does contact Mr. Irvin, because it's important for the community to know that if someone's contacted Dr. Flores, that Mr. Irvin is going to ensure that those specific sites get taken care of. This is a major thing, because parents want to make sure that their kids are going back to a school that's safe. And this is just no problem in doing it now, because this is part of the budget process. Yeah. And I got to agree. It gives me a ability to say that the Biden administration, I think, did a great job by giving us this funding, and the Congress and Senate to give us this funding to deal with these type of issues. The pandemic caused problems. The additional money is to mitigate the problems that it caused. This happens to be one of the problems. Right. All the other things we talked about tonight, are there reasons why we have that additional funding? Because we know we had a year of learning that wasn't at the level that it should have been because of the pandemic. The goal is to use that money to do some catch up, including taking care of our buildings and facilities. So I think it's right on time. And that's the reason why I asked for this extra budget meeting to ensure that we're going to use this money to address those type of issues. Thank you.
And I'll add it to my list. And Dr. Flores, I'll reach out to you. And you're right, Mr. Tillman. Some of those ESSER dollars can be used to address the facility-related issues. Dr. Flores, you are correct. And so therefore, I will say very quickly, we did talk about school beautification, looking at facilities. I was at a school site today, and I believe that all of our schools got to be at the highest level of professional excellence. And so I will be addressing that. I've already made some phone calls. So I agree with you, Dr. Flores. So I'll talk with you, Dr. Flores, offline to get that information. And again, that will be part of our program going forward, which is school beautification. So thank you.
All right. Okay, thank you for that. And we will move to 3.2, board retreat.
Yeah, and I think one of the things here, I know that the board, I know that the board, we've talked about a board retreat. So what I really need to know from the board is offline, can you send me just a list of dates that you're available, mainly Saturdays between now and August 2nd? I think the goal is, it would be nice for us to get a board retreat in hopefully this month, if we could do it this month as soon as possible, maybe around July 26th, I believe, if I got the date correctly. Let me look at the date again. Yes, July 26th, which is a Saturday, but I know not everyone can make it. And I know some of you have indicated that you're going to be on vacation. So what I need to know from the board, is there 2 to 3 Saturdays between now and the first day of school, August 2nd, that we can do a board retreat? And I think a Saturday seems to make more sense, because I know during the workday, all of our board members are working, and it's going to be challenging. But if we can, and don't worry about the retreat topics. We're not talking about that today. We're still going to work behind the scenes. I'll work with the board president, the board vice and vice president, and get board members' input on the topics. We'll work on that, but I just need to know the dates.
Madam President, I don't want to ask Mr. Irvin a question. I thought it was June 26th, Saturday.
That was a great day, but I think someone couldn't make it, I believe.
We had one board member that
Who can't make it?
Mm-hmm.
Who can't make it? And it's all day you can't make it, Scott?
Yes, so
what day can you make, Scott?
Well, but the date that he can make now might not be good for someone else. That's why we said we would ask for those Saturdays, so then he can.
The date I provided, I could attend, someone else can.
Yes.
What date is that?
I think it was the 10th. Let me look.
So we got
July 10th and 17th, I'm on vacation.
So yes, Dr. Flores has given us her list. So if we can just look at those additional Saturdays, look at it from there.
The best way to do it is to go, we got the calendar in front of us. Let's just go through each Saturday and see what Saturday we can make it. We'll be done with it.
Well, the other Saturday is the 19th.
Okay. Who can't make the 19th?
That's June.
I can't. I'm sorry.
Okay, what about June 26th?
That's the one that God can't make.
Okay. How about July 3rd? I'm just kidding.
Definitely not July 3rd.
No.
I'm just throwing it out there, because Dr. Rogers did say go through every Saturday.
I can make July 24th and 31st.
Okay, July 24th.
I can do that.
I can't. I'm not going to give an answer at this point because I don't.
So that's why, and we really honestly, and Dr. White, I know your schedule is crazy with the,
I haven't even filled out my vacation.
So if we would just be able to just send some dates, and then, as I've asked Superintendent Irvin to look at those dates, because the more we were going back and forth, we want people to know when they're going to be on or when they're going to be off, but we want everyone there. That's the goal for sure.
It's important.
I agree.
We have a new board member. We have a new superintendent. Yes. It really provides an opportunity for all of us to calibrate. And also we have Mr. Sullins is new as well. It gives us a chance to calibrate with the team, the executive leadership team and the board, our new board member, and obviously our newest member, Mr. Sullins, we all get a chance to calibrate. So if Dr. Wyatt, if you can get back with us and let me know if either the 17th or the 24th would work, just let me know. Does anyone here has any issues with the 17th of July or the 24th?
I won't be able to meet in person. I could either do a Zoom. I wouldn't be able to meet in person. I'm actually leaving the 13th all the way to the 21st July.
Yeah, I'm not available on the 17th, but I am. I'll send. Who do we send the dates to? Karen?
You can send them directly to me.
You want them directly, or you want her to be able to doodle them together?
Oh yeah, go ahead and send them to Karen. That's fine.
That way she can.
And I just looked. I'm off the week before, so I'm out for July 17th as well.
What about the 24th?
I'll have to check, but I know
I think it would be better if they just send the dates.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, yeah. So if we could just send, if we send the dates, and then that way they can weed it down all the way through August. You know, we'll just look at.
Just to clarify, Madam President, we're sending the dates to Karen?
Yes.
Yes, to Karen.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. Send your dates of availability or non-availability to Karen, and then we
August 2nd.
We've been trying to do that for a couple of weeks, so we want to respect everybody's time on and off.
Okay.
Okay. So, Superintendent Irvin, do you have what you need? You will get it.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure, but you know, I don't want to throw this. I don't want to ask this question, but I was going to say, do we want to do it on a weekday? But I know we can.
Yeah.
I don't think no one's available during the weekday, so
we just want to cut because Saturday gives us a longer time frame.
Right. Saturday gives us all day.
Right. Okay. That was his posing question. The next thing is 4.1 adjournment. So again, we want to again congratulate and welcome Superintendent Irvin and Harold, there you are, you're still on. So welcome to you as well. And then the other Harold is still on too. So thank you for all you do. And thank the whole team. This was great. This was good for us, a good start. So we appreciate you all for all of your information. And good night and God bless. Have a great rest of the week. See you on Tuesday the 8th.
Good night.